Tonight, by popular request, you will see my one-year-old granddaughter, Imogene, who lives in Maine, attempt her first few steps without the help of the carriage she was pushing a few weeks ago. I'll play the clip a few times tonight. I hope that you will enjoy the fun.
She's doing it!
I fell down. Come here.
I'm gonna do it! She's doing it! She's doing it!
I fell down. Come here.
I'm gonna do it! She's doing it! She's doing it! I'm gonna do it! She's doing it! She's doing it!
I fell down.
I'm gonna do it! She's doing it! She's doing it! I'm gonna do it! She's doing it! She's doing it!
I fell down.
I'm gonna do it! She's doing it! She's doing it! I'm gonna do it! She's doing it! She's doing it! I'm gonna do it! She's doing it! She's doing it!
Well, soon she'll be scampering around the yard. That was a very proud, positive, happy, and determined child attempting to learn how to walk with a lot of positive encouragement and help from her mother and friends. Our town needs to adopt this determination because we have a sword of Damocles hanging over the taxpayer's head and a finger in the dike because of this sword of Damocles, as I will explain once again tonight. I have discussed the sword of Damocles hanging over the heads of our taxpayers many times in the past 2 years over this program. Often people ask, Brian, please tell us more about Damocles and why the sword was hanging over his head. I will also tell tonight the tale of the little Dutch boy in the Netherlands who stuck his finger in a dike to stop a leak and to help until help could be given by experts to repair the damage to the dike. If you're a little 9-year-old boy watching this program with your Polish mother, pay attention to these stories. They will help you in life. I will also tonight show a short video clip from a recent Board of Selectmen meeting showing a minority selectman finally realizing, after many years in office, that there has been and still is a sword of Damocles hanging over the head of the town taxpayers as the selectman attempts to join the town manager and the majority selectman by sticking her finger in the leaky dike at the last minute while continuing to be a hindrance, along with her party and their supporters, to resolve the real problem, the lack of a badly needed major increase in town revenue, and the need for everyone to pull together to positively help the town walk, or better yet run, to prosperity. To date, the Democrats, at least their leaders, have not published a plan of their own to solve the revenue problem that we have in Winsted and help to remove the sword hanging over our taxpayers' heads. Instead, they want to add more taxes in very difficult times that will increase the size of the sword that is hanging over our heads and make the hole in the dike even larger and more difficult to fill until help arrives with more additional profitable revenue. There are other interesting issues to discuss tonight. 4 unaffiliated voters have registered petitions to run for office as petitioners and not as members of a major or minor political party. 1 petitioner will run for a seat on the Board of Selectmen, and 3 petitioners will run for re-election to the Board of Education. Generally, but not always, it is very difficult to win as a petitioner against members of the major and minor political parties. The last time we had an election, 2 people did win as petitioners, I believe. To date, if the petitions are approved and the petitioners carry through, we have 11 announced candidates for the Board of Selectmen with 7 seats available, and 9 announced candidates for the 4 seats available on the Board of Education. If a present Republican member of the Board of Education wins the selectman seat that he is running for, there will be 5 seats available on the Board of Education. If not, there will only be 4 seats available. The local independent party will hold its caucus tomorrow night, Thursday the 13th, at 7 p.m. to nominate its slate of candidates. Watch the Friday papers as they may publish the results and perhaps some commentary. Damocles is a figure in a single moral anecdote concerning the sword of Damocles, a late addition to classic Greek culture. The figure belongs properly to legend rather than Greek myth. The anecdote apparently figured in the lost history of Sicily. Remember, I'm part Sicilian, so I'm interested in this sort of thing. By Timaeus of Tauromenium, 356 to 260 BC, circa 356 to 260 BC. Damocles was a fawning attender in the court of the 4th century BC tyrant of Syracuse, Dionysius II. The attender, Damocles, explained that as a great man of power and authority, Dionysius was very fortunate. Dionysius offered to switch places with him for a day so he could taste firsthand that fortune. In the evening, a banquet was held where Damocles very much enjoyed being waited upon like a king. Only at the end of the meal did he look up over his head and notice a sharpened sword hanging directly over his head by a single horse hair. Immediately, Damocles lost all taste for the fine foods and beautiful maidens and asked leave of the tyrant, saying he no longer wanted to be so fortunate. Dionysius had successfully conveyed a sense of the constant great fear in which a great man lives. Marcus Tullius Cicero was a Roman philosopher, statesman, lawyer, political theorist, and Roman constitutionalist. Cicero is widely considered one of Rome's greatest orators and prose stylists. Cicero uses this story as the last in a series of contrasting examples for reaching the conclusion that he had been moving towards his fifth disputation, in which the theme is that virtue is sufficient for living a happy life. Cicero asks, does not Dionysius seem to have made it sufficiently clear that there can be nothing happy for the person over whom some fear always looms? The sword of Damocles tale is frequently used in allusion to this point, epitomizing the imminent and ever-present peril faced by those in positions of power. More generally, it is used to denote the sense of foreboding engendered by a precarious situation, especially one in which the onset of tragedy is restrained only by a delicate trigger of chance. In Winston's case, the sword of Damocles hanging over our heads by a horsehair is the extremely large percentage of our annual budget that is contributed by the state and federal governments. I will discuss this once again tonight, since it is appropriate during this year where we not only have a problem in our town with our budget, but we have a worldwide recession, a United States recession, and a Connecticut recession. And the revenue is dropping rapidly. We are afraid that it may fall on the taxpayers' heads. I also want to talk tonight a little bit about the little Dutch boy. I'm sure you all know this story when you were children, from Hans Brinker and the Silver Skates. Dutch legend has it that there was once a small boy who, upon passing a dike on his way to school, noticed a slight leak as the sea trickled in through the small hole. Knowing that he would be in trouble if he would be late for school, the boy poked his finger into the hole and so stemmed the flow of water. Sometime later, a passerby saw him and went for help. This came in the form of other men who were able to effect repairs on the dikes and seal up the leak, avoiding a catastrophe. This story is told to teach us that if we act quickly And in time, even with our limited strength and resources, we can avert disasters. This is often used as an illustration of self-sacrifice. The physical lesson is that a small trickle of water soon becomes a stream, and the stream a torrent, and the torrent a flood sweeping all before it. We in Winsted are very familiar with a flood sweeping all before it. It sweeps dike material, roadways and cars, and even railway tracks and bridges and sometimes whole trains. The tale was first published in Hans Brinker, or The Silver Skates, by Mabel Dodge, an American writer, in 1865. That's a familiar date, Civil War date. The Little Dutch Boy is a very popular myth in the U.S., but not as well known in the Netherlands. I will now go to the agenda for tonight, August 12th, 2009. I will first talk about the number of days remaining until the November election. I will talk about the Sword of Damocles, which I already did, the Little Dutch Boy story, which I already did, and then I will talk more and at greater length on the town of Winchester and the Sword of Damocles. Let me first try to find these days to the election. I think I didn't put them a little out of place here, but I'll get them. Well, I'll get them as we go along. Okay, here they are. Election day is November 3rd, 2009. This is very important for our town because we need to pick leaders that will solve this Sword of Damocles problem for us while keeping our facilities and expenses in check. Days to the election, 84. Weeks to the election, 12.5. Months to the election, 2.75. The final weekly program, Planning for Success, will be over on or before 11/3/09. The Sword of Damocles and the town of Winchester. Well, what is this Sword of Damocles that's hanging over our head by a horse hair? Well, it's additional profitable revenue. The town of Winchester does not have enough of this additional profitable revenue growing each year to meet the town's needs and wants. We need to find money for budget overruns during these difficult times and during normal times, potential budget overruns and possible revenue shortfalls in 2009, 2010, and future budgets. The state budget is not complete. It's still in negotiations. The eventual state budget, once finalized, may contain further shortfalls to our town and school 2009-2010 budgets. Areas of concern during these difficult financial times. The fund balance may be at about $350,000 or so once all the dust settles around the end of August for the 2008-2009 budget. The fund balance, as mentioned before, is recommended by the auditors to be kept at about 5% of the total budget for or $1,500,000. So we're quite a way off from that. Now I want to point out here that other towns during these difficult times are in the same bind. Torrington, for example, and other towns around the state, so 169 towns and cities around the state, many of them have the same problem we do. They have been paying for expenses by using the fund balance. And now their fund balances are less than the auditor's recommendations. So we're not alone in this. I'm sure there are some people that are still in good financial shape and have a good fund balance. We're not one of them. Now, the ECS grant that we receive is between $6 and $7 million a year. It's about $7 million. Many years ago, a few years ago, we received $600,000 less from them than we expected. We have concerns about the ECS grant. Should the state reduce it more once they finalize their own budget? However, the ECS grant does stand a good chance of being left alone by the state, but we'll see. It's always best to plan for the worst case, of course, in a positive way. And the various state grant commitments to the town of Winchester and or its agencies is another problem for us, potential problem. Now, I just told you what the sword of Damocles was hanging over the taxpayers in the town of Winchester's head. Now I'll just discuss a little bit what the finger in the dike may be. And these are some possible sources of emergency revenue. This is like the emergency room of a hospital. You never know who's coming in the next minute or two with a very serious problem. But you have to be prepared for the worst case. So some of the things that the town manager and the major party selectmen are reviewing with their town employees, agencies, and whatever else, are to cut the town and school spending beyond that which is thought practical. That's being looked at as we speak, and you can hear about that in various selectmen meetings that are on Channel 13 every other Monday, plus special meetings that happen between. They're not always televised, but they do have special meetings that are reported in the paper, and minutes are produced, and you can get hold of those in the town clerk's office. Temporary or permanent furloughs of town and agency personnel. Stop replacements of retired and retiring personnel. Layoffs of town and agency personnel. Stop project work if the state and or federal governments can't provide the money that they have promised, and that's a possibility. Borrow money for emergencies, and there are things in the charter that allow us to do that under certain circumstances, if possible and practical, where the charter allows. Part of the finger in the dike may be to stop funding various town agencies. be things like the library, the senior center, and other town agencies that receive money from the budget. And of course, there's always the alternative of raising taxes of the existing taxpayers. It all depends on how serious and how heavy this sword is when it falls on our head. With that now, Dave, if we can show the clip of the last selectman meeting, I would appreciate it.
An email about the state money that comes from us, and my concern is our third and fourth quarter. If the state doesn't give us the money on time because they, A, don't have it, or B, they're borrowing it for all these grants that we get, like our ECS money is what, like close to $7 million that we get. If they don't make their payments on time, if we don't get the town aid road money or the Pequot money, all that other money, how will we, in the fourth quarter, because we don't have a fund balance right now really that can carry a large amount of, let's say, town obligations. Can you, like in the background somewhere, start to make a plan in case that were to happen?
Sure.
You know, because
It's a doomsday plan. Because that ECS grant, as you know, and everybody knows, is the biggest, most important grant. And without it, the system cannot operate.
But I mean, even where we are in the fund balance right now, at the projection last I saw was like 350, somewhere around there. If we were not to get even some of the other smaller grants that we had to fund some of our obligations from in the short term, we don't even have
Correct.
enough money to back that up. So in my short, I think it was an email with you, that might be something, while we're getting this ARA money and it's going into fund ECS, that other piece of it, just in case it were to happen.
Sure.
You know, we're hoping that that's not going to happen and they'll get through with that stalemate, but hopefully.
Well, they're meeting again tomorrow. Our leadership is meeting again tomorrow.
And then, if in the state funding too, there's a chance that we're not going to get the money in a grant that we have in our current 09-10 budget.
Correct.
We will need to have a plan for that, as well as how we're going to fund that hole, or not fund something so that the hole doesn't occur. So the $250,000 or $350,000 plan that's here, if we get $10,000 less or $30,000 less in some other grant that we have projected in here, we'll have to get on that right away as well.
That's why they should have passed the budget in March, or April 17th would have been the ideal date.
Yeah, well, we all agree with that. But if it doesn't, it hasn't happened, so.
And depending on what the grant is for, if the money doesn't come through, we just don't do the project, or we don't do whatever the program is.
There are some programs within the Board of Ed and within the Senior Center that are fully grant funded, and those positions just go away.
But if ECS stops, that's $7 million.
Well, if ECS stops, then payroll goes away.
We couldn't have a big enough fund balance to cover the CS grant if that goes away.
No, I don't think that's...
Okay, well, you saw the clip. I might show that again at the end of the show if we have time, the end of the program. A day late, a dollar short. Minority selectmen always seem to be that way. The town manager and the 5 Republican selectmen have been working on this problem diligently, as you know from watching the meetings. And that looked to me more like a political statement than anything else. But I'm giving her the benefit of the doubt. I'm assuming that she's finally woken up and she sees, and maybe her party as well, the Democratic Party, and she sees that we have missed an opportunity in the past to get some revenue in this town to avoid having this sword of Damocles hanging over our head and our need to stick our finger in the dike. All the finger in the dike, as I explained to you on these charts, will end up being a little of each, probably. We'll probably have to do a little of each. I know a person who was once offered dessert at a party, and they offered her 4 or 5 different choices, and she said, I'll have a little of each. So that's what we are wrestling with as a town and as taxpayers right now, and we'll continue to do so for the near future and perhaps even longer than that. But the problem has been around a long time. And now as I go back to my charts, we, the town, have missed a very, very good opportunity to get more revenue in this town a few years back. It wasn't certain because permits need to be made. But we have some developments in town that have been going on for about 5 years or more, trying to come into our town to provide age-restricted housing for senior citizens, people over 55 and over, which would be very profitable revenue for our town. It would be a great deal of revenue for our town. And had we acted a few years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, before the recession, we might have some of that money trickling into our town right now. And right now, a trickle is like a full glass of water to us because we need it so bad. Now, as far as the missed opportunity is concerned, in June 1966, I put out some green papers. I have a copy of them with me tonight, just so you can see. There's a copy of them down at the town hall. They're a bit outdated, but not in essence. And I studied the town. I studied and looked for the opportunities to get more revenue in town. And while I was studying the town, I found out that we were in financial difficulties and had this sort of Damocles hanging over our head. So I wrote these green papers. I'm one of the few people in town who writes any papers. Most people don't even like to read the papers, never mind write any. But I took this to the selectmen. I went to each of the commission meetings and gave them a copy, a letter addressed to them. And I went to most of the town critical agencies. So I wanted to show you that. And if there's a little time later, I'll talk a little bit more about it. The essence of the paper was that we did have these developments coming into town, knocking on our door, low-hanging fruit. And they were pretty high-end developments, a golf course, and the houses averaged quite a bit of money. There'll be a lot of tax money coming in. A lot of things, a lot of benefits are all listed in the green papers. So my suggestion to the selectmen, it was the previous administration that was in, not this one, was to expedite the very profitable age-restricted developments and golf course along the Enterprise Corridor between Winston and Torrington. They needed a few things approved. For example, permits of the inland wetlands and permits from planning and zoning. And they also needed to be able to run water and sewer down the Enterprise Corridor between Winston and Torrington so they could have it for their development projects. Everybody wanted these developments to be safe and not to hurt the environment. But in general, in town, there was a need, and everybody recognized the need for the revenue from these developments once they were fully implemented. Now, to be fair, we missed that opportunity, and because of the recession, worldwide recession, and because we moved way too slow as a town. Now, remember, I did go to a meeting, summit meeting that was held by EDC, and they had a lot of the town businessmen there, and they had somebody from the state there. And they basically said, we want to get rid of the raggy image of the town of Winchester. We want to try to improve our boards and commissions to make them more business friendly, to help us attract these businesses, enterprises, and large developments to our town in a safe and profitable manner. The representative from the state said that it takes much longer in Connecticut than it does in other states to do equivalent things. And he gave an example of it takes in other states 3 months to do what it takes us a year to do in getting our environments permits out, things like that. So we have some improving to do, which the present Board of Selectmen is trying to do. The Green Papers pointed out that these developments would produce a major increase in the profitable tax base each year. There was a study done by the developers. It's in the Green Papers. It's in the Town Hall. It's in the Planning and Zoning Office, and probably in the Inland Wetlands Office. And you can read it for yourself. It's also a copy in my Green Papers. Put some of the tax money aside in sinking funds. They laughed at me when I mentioned that. And saving accounts for various town and school needs now and in the future. And I told them in the Green Papers that many of the benefactors would be, and I'll list them here, and I won't have all of them, but I'll have many of them. And the way I got this list was just by asking people and reading the paper and watching meetings and seeing who needed the money that would come in from these developments. Well, the benefactors would be the existing taxpayers, because they would get help from additional new profitable taxpayers in terms of millions of dollars to help them share the expense of running the town of Winchester in a well-balanced manner. The local businesses all agree that they would benefit from another 800 or 900 people living in town. That would be the existing businesses, mainly the retail businesses, and the new ones that would come because of the additional size in the town, 800 or 900 people. The schools would benefit. The schools would benefit because they'd be able to hire more teachers and have better classes to help with their test score problem. The schools would also benefit because we could clean up the buildings. Maybe build a new one or two over a longer period of time once the fund had some money in it. Now remember, the Bachelor School already has a sinking fund. And every time we get to $75,000 from earned interest and things, we can take, say, $50,000 out and spend it on the Bachelor School, wherever way we want. Public Works. We could put some money aside to improve the roads, improve the bridges, and all the things that Public Works needs money to do but can't get from the year-to-year budgets as we stand now. Highland Lake. I did a couple special programs on Highland Lake. I did approach the Highland Lake Association, and they, as an association, they cannot take political stands, although individually some are positive. I would say most of the people on Highland Lake that I talk to, and I talk to a lot, are in favor of the developments, providing they don't ruin the lake. Now, all the tests were taken when they did the inland wetlands permit work and had the public hearings, and the planning and zoning work and had the public hearings, and the basic answer was that these developments would not hurt Highland Lake, they would not hurt the Canavo Spring, the blasting, etc., and they would not hurt the wells that are around the lake in the areas where there is no town water. And also, the developer did agree to put monitoring equipment in around his property so that the town could keep a close eye on the progress from year to year to year, and then take action when necessary if some unexpected occurrence were to happen. Now, individually, there are a small group of Highland Lake residents that are against these developments for various reasons. Most are on the east side of West Wakefield Boulevard. But I'm pretty sure that most people on Highland Lake, especially in these times when money's so tight, would continue to want to see these developments come if they were done in a responsible manner, and there is no indication now that they won't be. The Water and Sewer Commission was in favor of these developments. It would bring more money to their coffers, and that in turn would help with keeping up and adding new water lines and keeping up their wonderful facilities they have for us. Downtown development, which is going on since the flood of 1955, and redevelopment. Both of those commissions were in favor of these developments, if done responsibly and as planned. I'm pretty sure they're both still in favor. Matter of fact, I think all these people are still in favor of this, with the exception of Highland Lake, which has not made an official pronouncement either way. They are neutral on this, and their individuals do express their opinions through various political parties and things like that. Groups, pressure groups, that kind of thing. But remember, they're a small minority of the people in this town. They are very loud, but they're a small group in numbers. And in my green papers, I suggested that we take some of the tax money that we get each year and give aid to manufacturing people to help clean up these manufacturing buildings that are old and get them back in use again. And it would certainly help if we could give them some money to help with the cleanup. Can't be just the state and the federal government and themselves. It would help a little bit more if we could get involved as well. So for more details on how I thought the money could be used, how much money might come in, and that's changing over time mainly because of the delay in getting all the permits and getting the recession hitting us in the middle of this whole thing, I put it all in the green papers. It's still the same basic principle. It's just going to take longer. The parcels will probably be a little cheaper, so they won't bear as much tax money, and it might take a little longer to sell them, but over a 10-year period or a 15-year period or something, that we could get this low-hanging fruit, and sooner or later we'd at least see some light at the end of the tunnel for this sort of Damocles problem. We're also, of course, working hard to get more manufacturers into this town. We haven't been very lucky with that in the last 5 or 6 years, but over time we hope to get them down the Enterprise Corridor, the whole Enterprise Corridor, and especially the area between Winston and Torrington, and that would help us as well, because they are some of the largest taxpayers in town. Howmet is the second largest taxpayer in town, and until recently, Homer D. Bronson was in the top 10. So most people in town agree with the approach, and they like the possible result. The Republican Town Committee agreed with the approach. When I went to see them, they talked to me for a couple hours, and they were already way ahead of me in recognizing the need for these developments and participating, much to the chagrin of others, in trying to help them come into our town. The Economic Development Commission, very positive, still are to this day about these developments. And again, the Redevelopment Commission, very positive. The Independent Party Town Committee, they were very positive. I went to their meeting for an hour and a half, and I did go to the Economic Development Commission as well, and Redevelopment Commission, talked to them about these green papers. And of course, the Taxpayers Association president, who at the time was Richard Pozo, was very positive about these developments, provided they didn't bring too much burden to our school system by having too many school-aged children in the developments. That was kind of the feeling of both the Independent Party, the Taxpayer Association president, and of course most of the other people who were in favor of these developments. And as I mentioned earlier, the Water and Sewer Commission. Now we're going to get a little bit to the heart of this talk tonight. And as those that did not take a public stand in favor and showed signs of being against these developments, very strong signs of being against these developments, even though I went to their meeting, the Democratic Town Committee. And to this day, I still think they may be against these developments as a group. And they were led in these feelings by their senior selectmen, Democratic selectmen, in the last administration. They were vehement at times. I went to the Democratic Town Committee meeting to present my 2006 green papers, and one of the two Democratic selectmen, Selectman Althea Perez, was absent. She wasn't there. I spent almost 2 hours there explaining my green papers. And I had already given them to the selectmen and all the other commissions before I went to this meeting. The Democratic Town Committee was very hospitable to me, but the other selectmen, Selectman Welcome, showed up late during the presentation and didn't hear it all. The Democrats and their supporters went on to propose the very large bond package that caused them to lose, was one of the great causes in their losing majority in the next election. There were many other factors too. They still appear to be fighting the major revenue producing developments that are still going through the Army Corps in DEP permit process in an attempt to proceed with development when the recession is over. So the developer is still trying to get through the bureaucracy of the state and the town and get these golf course and developments approved where he needs to have them approved. There's one development he doesn't need to get approval, I don't think, from the DEP and the Army Corps. But he needs to get that done, and he needs to get this water approved and sewer to go down the corridor. Now, at the meeting we had a few weeks ago that I was invited to, everybody went from the town except the Democratic selectman who was invited. In my view, and I know I'm talking to a lot of Democrats on this program because they talk to me on the street, the Democrats should wake up and help the rest of the town and developers to be successful. An opportunity has been delayed unnecessarily, and let's all be ready to pull together once this recession is over, get this revenue into town, and get our finger out of the dike. Let's all help to get the taxpayers' finger out of the dike by removing the sword of Damocles hanging over their heads as soon as possible. On the revenue issue, the Democrats are running behind with the pooper scooper and have been for the last 4 years proving a hindrance rather than a help. Other organizations listed tonight are leading the effort by using the power of unity. They're trying to work together to get this revenue into town and to also keep our spending within our means, which is no easy feat. Now, I also want to show you a great concern I have. I went down to the town hall and I looked for this whole administration, meeting attendance of this administration to date, regular and special meetings. There were 2 or 3 meetings that didn't have attendance figures on, so I couldn't see them. But Mayor Fracasso has only missed 1 meeting since the beginning of his term. And if you go to almost any meeting during the week, downtown at night, you will see Mayor Fracasso there in attendance, trying to learn, provide support, and understand the process better. And I give him great credit for only missing 1 meeting. Selectman Ham, a very hard worker, has been helping the town for almost 20 years as a member of various commissions and vice chair of the Planning and Zoning Commission until a few years ago. He's only missed 3 meetings. Selectman Liskin has missed 5 meetings. Selectman Capabianca has missed 5 meetings. Selectman Berlinski has missed 5 meetings. Selectman Renzullo has missed 7 meetings. And Selectman Perez, who you saw in the clip tonight, missed 13 meetings in the last administration, and the administration is not even over yet. So if you ask me, who would I rather see re-elected, I don't have much of a choice here because several of the people aren't running in the next election, but Selectman Fracasso is my choice for one of the seats and to be mayor. The only other 2 running, Renzullo and Perez, from the existing administration, no thank you for Selectman Perez to either win or be mayor, because I'm paying tax money in this town, good tax money, and I want it in the hands of people that have the time to pay attention and to do the job right. And I would rather see Selectman Perez spend full time working with the Region 7 or occupation and trying to solve some of the problems that I hear we have there. Now, we're just about done for tonight. I will re-show the Selectman clip again as we exit the program. Thank you for watching. Remember, the Fireman's Carnival starts tonight for the next few days. Try to attend and help them out. Thank you. See you next week.
An email about the state money that comes from us, and my concern is our 3rd and 4th quarter. If the state doesn't give us the money on time because they A, don't have it, or B, they're borrowing it for all these grants that we get, like our ECS money is what, like close to $7 million that we get. If they don't make their payments on time, if we don't get the town aid road money or the Pequot money, or all that other money, how will we, in the 4th quarter, because we don't have a fund balance right now really that can carry a large amount of, let's say, town obligations. Can you, like in the background somewhere, start to make a plan in case that were to happen?
Sure.
You know, because
it's a doomsday plan. Because that ECS grant, as you know, and everybody knows, is the biggest, most important grant. Right. And without it, the system cannot operate.
But I mean, even where we are in the fund balance right now, at the projection last I saw was like 350 somewhere around there. If we were not to get even some of the other smaller grants that we had to fund some of our obligations from in the short term, we don't even have
Correct.
enough money to back that up. So in my short, I think it was an email with you, that might be something, while we're getting this ARA money and it's going in to fund ECS, that other piece of it, just in case it were to happen.
Sure.
We're hoping that that's not going to happen and they'll get through with that stalemate, but hopefully,
Well, they're meeting again tomorrow. Our leadership is meeting again tomorrow.
and then if in the state funding too, there's a chance that we're not going to get the money in a grant that we have in our current 09-10 budget.
Correct.
We will need to have a plan for that as well as how we're going to fund that hole. Or not fund something so that the hole doesn't occur. So the $250,000 or $350,000 plan that's here, if we get $10,000 less or $30,000 less in some other grant that we have projected in here, we'll have to get on that right away as well.
That's why they should have passed the budget in March, or April 17th would have been the ideal date.
Yeah, well, we all agree with that. But if it doesn't, it hasn't happened, so.
And depending on what the grant is for, if the money doesn't come through, we just don't do the project, or we don't do whatever the program is.
There are some programs within the Board of Ed and within the senior center that are fully grant funded, and those positions just go away.
But if ECS stops, that's $7 million.
Well, if ECS stops, then payroll goes away.
We couldn't have a big enough fund balance to cover the ECS grant if that goes away.
No, I don't think that's...
I